Global News. Global News Sports.
Jazz and blues.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, look, we can talk about it. You know why? Because we could talk about it. Now, I've already stated this before, okay? I made a video. Now it's coming back to the forefront. And when you look at what's going on this last little bit, with the desperate attempts of the ACC as well as the Stanford and Cal to stay relevant as a Power 5 member. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. But it's not logically correct or makes any logic sense to actually skip over two prominent conferences to go, three conferences to go way east. You know what I mean? So the main purpose of mentioning all of this is because, okay, the Big 12 have been on the radar for furthering expansion, and it would only make sense, right? Because let's say, now look at it like this: the 4 schools went to the Big 10, the 4 schools went to the Big 12. Now, these schools didn't leave. They are still in their geographic location. The only thing they did was switch conferences and added travel time or more travel mileage to their traveling. Now, when you hear about After Dark or the Pacific Coast time, and you have you also heard the West Wing. Now, when you look at it, yes, it was feasible to add the Corner 4 schools, and by the Big 10 picking up UCLA, USC, Oregon, and Washington, all that do is just solidify a matchup every year between the Big 12 and the Big 10 with those schools. Those Pac-12 schools are still going to play each other. They're still going to compete in the respective new conferences. You're going to see matchups on the schedule every year, at least one game from a 4-corner school, or 2 from a 4-corner school, and 1 or 2 games from a Big 10 school in relation and correlation with those old Pac-12 members. Now, it would only make sense. Now, this makes financial sense for both parties. If the Big 12 adds Stanford and Cal, it would make sense in this fashion, okay? Whatever the ratings were for the TV viewership with Oregon playing Stanford, or UCLA playing Stanford, or USC playing Stanford, or Washington playing Stanford, or Utah, or any of the other 4-corner schools, but mainly we're going to just focus on the Big 10 brands. Oregon, Washington, UCLA, or USC plays Stanford. Whatever those ratings are going to continue to stay there, but may even amplify a little more because they have more viewership in these newer conferences. So that's what you will gain if the Big 12 adds Stanford and Cal. And I'm not referencing Cal so much because I don't think they draw in numbers. Plus Plus, they would be, just a brand as opposed to doing anything on the field. And they're not so much financially in the plus. So it would only make sense if, as I mentioned, you have Stanford and Cal, or Stanford playing those four brands that went to the Big 12. I mean, the Big 10. And not only that, it will give the Big 12 access to the coast to coast, right? Pacific time, Eastern time with UCF and West Virginia, and then you would have Stanford and Cal. Now, that would bring the Big 12 up to 18 members on that road to 20. It would only leave 2 more slots open in case if the ACC implode. But to be honest with you, it wouldn't be a bad move to add Stanford and Cal, especially if ESPN is going to back it with money. I mean, it's like you can't lose, really. I mean, you're not losing anything. You can only gain TV viewership. And what that will do is secure games with those 4 schools each year. Oregon, Washington, UCLA, and USC. Because the Big Ten want to reduce the travel time for those 4 schools. And if Stanford and Cal is in the Big 12, you best believe there's going to be 2 to 4 matchups to reduce travel time with those Big 12 schools. So technically, it's almost like management is being transferred from out of the Pac-12 to the Big 10 and the Big 12, and these schools are going to still play each other on the West Coast to reduce travel time, and they're going to play members of their respective conference. But what it does is it's just create more TV viewership for those schools. So to add Stanford and Cal will add more value to the Big 12 overall. It would add more viewership, and it would guarantee that Stanford and Cal would play those 4 schools out of the Big 10 every year. And it's almost like nothing really changes with the viewership. And it's just under a different umbrella of the Big 12 and the Big 10. So it's really nothing to lose by adding Stanford and Cal if ESPN backs it with the pro rata. And here's another thing I want to mention. One of the most powerfulest thing that Brett Yormark was able to obtain was that pro rata. Because you know what that means? That means that ESPN and Fox, or however that works, gave Brett Yormark to add any schools that he wants. Period. That's what that said. You can add any schools that's willing to come that is going to add value. You can add. And that doesn't limit, that don't limit the Big 12. That's the power that they have now. And a lot of people is overlooking the power of that pro rata. Now, let's look at it from a different standpoint. You have teams like, you have conferences like the Big 10, or should I say the SEC. They don't have pro ratas. So what is the difference? Okay. So the current contract that these conferences are in, right? The Big 10 and the SEC, when they add a member, they have to figure out how they're going to pay that member. If it's after the TV contract, right? Let's say they just did a 10-year deal with ESPN for $50 million per school, right? And it's for those 16 members. And let's say they add 2 more schools. They would have to pay for those schools out of their budget or their revenue, generated revenue. So they would have to allocate bringing those schools in for the same amount or a little bit less with their own earned revenue, right? And so that's the difference. When you have pro rata, you're saying you don't have to touch your reserves to bring these schools on. We're going to pay for it. You just bring them on and we're going to add it. And not only that, it increases the grand total of your TV money. Because look at it. If you started off at 300 million with 14 teams, right? And then you have a pro rata that says you can add any team that is of this stature, power stature, for equal revenue, and we're paying for it. And let's say the deal is for 10 years. That means that you can go out and add any power team that adds value and is willing to come to your conference free of cost to your conference. I mean, think about it. And not only that, it increased the overall value of your TV deal. Because if you bring two teams in at 50 million each times 10, we know what those numbers are. That's in addition. So that brings the grand total from the 300 million plus an additional 500 million, bringing the grand total to 800 million. But the point I'm trying to make is the power of the pro rata exceeds everything. And I think that is why you could see a little envy going on with the Big 12. With the Big 12 from the SEC, because if Brett Yormark didn't have that pro rata, you wouldn't see the Big 12 with 16 teams, period. They would be capped off at about 12 to 14 at the max. And that was based off their own budget. So the point I'm trying to make is that gives them the ability to grow their conference to the super conference, and they may be the quickest to get there. To be honest with you, if there was a race to the super conference, the Big 12 would be in the lead, period, because they have that pro rata. That pro rata exceeds all of that, and you can get to where you need to be as a super conference, first in line. So I just wanted to break that down to you on the pro rata thing, and the power that brings to the Big 12 to be able to get these schools free of cost of tapping into their reserves. They don't have to tap into their reserves to add these schools, unlike the other conferences. The Big 10 and the SEC, they got to come out of their reserves to bring in these other schools. But the Big 12 don't. All they got to do is get the okay from ESPN. Hey, here's the numbers. Is these schools good? Yep, they good. Let's go. Real simple. So that's how the Big 12 was able to accelerate and catch up to the SEC and the Big 10, clearly. And to be honest with you, that was brilliant. It's a good business venture on both sides. And to add Stanford and Cal, that would only solidify more TV viewership. I don't know what the numbers are on these TV viewerships between Stanford and the other Pac-12 brands, but I can imagine they do good numbers, and to add them won't be so bad, and that would bring the Big 12 up to 18. Or if they just add Stanford, I don't know. They may not want Cal. But the point I'm trying to make is the Big 12 have a bright future and opportunity with this pro rata thing, period. Once again, thank y'all for watching Global News Sports. Don't forget to have a good day. Thank you. Bye.